All right. Hello, everyone. That great 70s disco track is our theme for the night. Shame, and in particular, I've been we're thinking about ethics in this series. That's something that we do during this time period. Between Passover and Shavuot. We talked about this last week. We study ethics, or Derekh Eretz, the way of the world, because we're preparing to receive revelation on Shavuot. And the idea is, first we have to get right with everyone around us. First we have to get right with the world before we get right with God. First we have to get right with our fellow human beings. And so we turn to the great volume of ethics that the rabbis left us, Masechet Avot, Pirkei Avot, the chapters of our fathers, of our rabbis, of our ancestors, but really the chapters of ethics. And there's a lot in there. Every week we focus on one chapter. This is our second class, but we did 1 and 2 last time. So this is the third week of the cycle, and we're on the third chapter. And I would say it doesn't all fit under the category of ethics, at least not as I just described it. And some of them really are very, very much religious precepts, or just sort of exhortations to focus on Torah and Torah study. So it's rabbinic ethics, which is not exactly parallel to the way that we use the term in modern philosophy, or even just the way we use the term in common speech, which means more the way we treat each other, the right and wrong of social behavior. And that's really where we're going to keep focusing in this series. So I'm moving through this week's chapter, which has some religious exhortation and has some strange kind of there's thoughts on the tithes, and there's all kinds of intricate, doesn't seem very like way of the world kind of material. But then I come across this topic in this week's chapter, which feels not just like a topic of ethics, but a topic of contemporary ethics, a topic that is very much of the moment, and that is public shaming. Public shaming. That's a term I think you can feel as I say it, that we have heard a lot in the cultural conversation in recent years. Public shaming is, of course, not new. We know the image of the pillory, right? The stocks that I associate it with early colonial America, and the sort of Puritan punishment for someone. One of the punishments was to put them in the pillory, to put their head and arms in a locked stock, so that everybody could see their disgrace, and they would do so in the public square. But there are all kinds of traditions of public punishment, public shaming, where the punishment seems, at least in part, precisely that it is done in public, that everybody is able to witness. There's a scene that I'm thinking of from Game of Thrones, right, where the queen was made to walk naked through the streets while everybody spit on her. All right, so that kind of public shaming is well established in history, and then there are versions of it that we associate with also lots of historical examples, but that we associate with school, with the classroom, right? The dunce cap, or standing in front of the class, writing your name on the board, or writing something on the board 100 times. Some way of what is the point of all of this is to either take revenge, or to push someone towards better behavior by putting their disgrace out in the public. Okay, so this is well-established human phenomenon. Whether it's good or not, we'll just talk about in the next hour. But there is something about it that feels, as I said, very, very of the moment, very revived in recent years. And I think a lot of that is because we have a new public square. right? The world, the other world, the world online is another public sphere. In fact, we tend to think of it as the public sphere. The public conversations happen there on the computer. And this is a place where, first of all, we can do a lot of shaming, right? People can really pile on to anything that they see, and comments and, dislikes and, sharing embarrassing memes and videos going viral, all of that. And that is to say, it's a place where we can do public shaming. It's also a place where one shameful thing can very quickly become public, right? Accidentally become public, as in the case of, I don't know, Jeffrey Toobin, or, things that happen online and someone's caught, and it's a shameful thing. And here's the issue, or here's the way that it is sometimes processed or churned through or referenced in our cultural conversation, which is that there seems to be something about it that we relish in as a culture. And I'm not saying you or me, but we somehow, our culture seems to manifest some kind of hunger for public shaming, and at the same time, there are those voices of critique that are saying, no, this is a bad thing. This is getting out of control. I mean, TMZ is an entire channel, right, devoted to public shaming. But there's all kinds of reference points. There's, we think of cancel culture as an attempt to direct shame towards someone, or just to make my point, if having an entry in Wikipedia is having a certain kind of existence in the world, I found a full entry for public humiliation, which does some of the historical recording of these this sort of phenomenon, and then another whole Wikipedia page for online shaming, right? And there are various categories. Revenge porn is another category, putting someone trying to shame their former partner by or maybe not their former partner, but having pictures of someone naked and putting that in the public to shame them, to take them down. I think a recent member of Congress was resigned in disgrace after such a thing, but nevertheless, even as she was resigning, amidst all the controversy, she said, I've been the victim here. I mean, those pictures were my private business, and this person's put them in the public, and now I can't get away from it. But that wasn't wrong that I took pictures of myself naked, right? So this is the sort of the landscape of the conversation today. And the other thing that I sort of found as I kind of Googled around and tried to read up a little bit before this class, is that a lot of the conversations in the last couple of years around public shaming have been linked to the pandemic and people criticizing each other's behavior on both sides, but often the people who have been the spreaders have been the targets of public shaming. And I say that meaning to kick up the question early on in class that it's very easy to disparage public shaming, to critique it, to condemn it, but we might also ask whether there is a positive use for public shaming, whether this actually has a function. And one of the functions of public shaming is holding people accountable, either in that pandemic conversation, in a kind of in a larger group social control way, or in the case of someone who is a public figure who has committed some great transgression. I think of the Me Too transgressions, and it's public shame that seemed to be the only mechanism that could take them down from their post. And in that sense, we might wonder whether public shaming has an important function in society. Okay, so we're going to discuss this. We're going to talk about the ethics of public shaming, and obviously, it's always the case that in an hour we won't do full justice to a topic this important and this kind of wide-reaching, but we're going to look at least grounded in some Jewish language and the history of the 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 rabbinic conversation around this. Okay, so let's get started. We'll make a little blessing just to bring some holiness into our learning. And if I forget to say so at the end of class, last night we counted the 23rd day of the Omer. I don't know that it'll be dark by the end of our class, but when it is dark, we'll count the next day. Okay, so a blessing over Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thanking God for allowing us to have a space where we can talk about important things in a serious way. Okay, first of all, shame is a form of damage in Jewish law, in Jewish tort law. Boshet, it's called, and there are various forms of damage that one can do to another, but humiliation or shame is one of them. And it's something that you might have to pay for. Okay, so Judaism recognizes Boshet as a category. However, I want to just name right away that we just read this past week. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha is also a Jewish concept. You must rebuke your neighbor if they've done something wrong, right? So tochacha, rebuke, is also a Jewish value. So just to say that that shaming is a form of damage doesn't mean to say that you can't ever say anything wrong about anyone. Okay, so we'll keep that asterisk in mind. That's in the realm of Jewish law. But our topic in this series is not law, but ethics. And in the realm of Jewish ethics, and more to the point, in the Jewish lexicon, right? There is a term for specifically for the act of public shaming. And the term is, and we'll look at it now, hamalbin et pnei chavero berabim. One who whitens the face of his friend or of their friend in the public, okay? Whitens the face of their friend in public. Let's now go into the Mishnah, the Mishnah here in our chapter, and look at the first appearance of that phrase, which becomes, this is like just a good phrase to walk away with and to know. Amalbim et pnei chavero, someone who whitens their friend's face. Now, what does that mean? There's a source sheet for you all, and here is the first appearance of it in chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot, and it's a teaching from Rabbi Elazar of Hamodai, which means he lived in the city of Modin, right? Which is still a city in Israel. Okay, Rabbi Elazar Hamodai, Omer, he said, and now he's going to give us a list, and we're going to only look at the bolded thing, but of course we want to know the context, so we're going to look at the whole Mishnah, whole teaching. Hamechalel et hakadashim, one who profanes sacred things. V'hamebaze et hamoadot, and one who disparages the festivals, disgraces or disparages the festivals. And here's the phrase: v'hamalbin pnei chavero berabim, and one who whitens the face of their friend in public. V'hamefer brito shel Avram Avinu alav shalom, and one who undoes the covenant of our father Abraham, may he rest in peace. V'hamegale panim b'torah shelo k'halacha, and one who displays faces of the Torah that are contrary to the law. All of those things, afal pi sheyesh biyado Torah u'masim tovim, even though this person may have Torah and good deeds, they have no share in the world to come. Okay, we'll get back to that's quite serious. So that's quite a serious consequence that Rabbi Elazar is suggesting. They have no share in the world to come. We don't really know what the world to come means, but it's I don't know if it's heaven or the great beyond or the revival of the dead, but it's the other world. It's the world that will be. It's having a share in the world to come. Another Mishnah says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelik l'olam haba. Everyone has a share in the world to come. Okay, but these people don't. Okay, so first of all, the phrase Hamalbin pnei chavero berabim, one who whitens the face of their friend in public. Now that of course I should just hasten to say because of the way that words like that ring in our modern ear. This has this is not a racial connotation in any way. That I hope is obvious. This is about going white, going pale. Someone who shocks their friend, shames them. Again, this is the idiom, but the meaning of it is someone who embarrasses their friend or their fellow chaver in public, barabim, and they go white. That's one of the things that Rabbi Elazar says takes away your share in the world to come. Basically, like, I don't know, imagine like that person doesn't go to heaven. I mean, that's not really exactly right, but like, it's like, that's it. You're done for. And you're done for even if you have all kinds of other good deeds under your belt. Okay, so that's the seriousness of it. Okay, we're gonna go layer by layer and try to understand what this means. What does it mean? So first of all, I think actually before we look at the words themselves, and we should think about why did they choose that phrase, whitening the face of the friend in public? Let's just look at the list for a second. What are these things that are on the list, just so we can like try to think a little bit about the context here. So one who profanes sacred things, that sounds like a general bad move, but it's not. It's very specific. Sacred things meaning things that are associated with the temple, things that are sanctified, and you've made them impure or treated them casually. So let's say you found like some of the poles of the tabernacle or the food of the priest or something like that, and you just sort of this is stupid. Look at this, I'm playing with it, and you make it unholy, either by making it impure or just by disrespecting it. And speaking of disrespecting, hamivazeh hamoadot, someone who disparages the festivals. Now, what that means is not exactly clear. Some commentators say that it's just someone who doesn't take the holiday seriously. In other words, maybe they take Shabbat seriously, but like, who cares about Shavuot? That's not a real holiday. Or other commentators say it's about the moed, very specifically in rabbinic language, is the period in the middle. This actually probably makes more sense in the rabbinic context. It's the period in between the two festival days of Passover and Shavuot. These are week-long festivals, and in the middle, you're not obligated to all of the strictures of holiday observance, but you shouldn't treat it like it's a regular weekday. Okay, you treat it like it's a holiday. You don't just sort of like celebrate Passover and then go to work and just forget about it until the end of Passover. You come back. You have to treat the whole. Okay, so that's another event. Okay, and then also on the list, the whitening of the public shaming, basically, and one who undoes the covenant of our father Abraham. Now, also a little bit of debate over that, where Maimonides, for example, says, this is a person who doesn't get circumcised or doesn't circumcise their children. But Rabbeinu Yonah says, and I think this is actually, this seems like what Rabbeinu Yonah says is like someone who tries to cover their circumcision up or tries to grow back their circumcision, right? We have Josephus actually recording that was something that people did in the time of like the Greek gymnasium when people were trying to not look Jewish. So someone who's ashamed of their circumcision, of their. Now, of course, Brito Shel Avram Avinu could mean just, again, it could be something broad, but because some of these other things are very specific, so most of the commentators read this specifically to the covenant. The word for covenant is brit, so like a bris. Okay, so take that as you will. And then finally, and this is maybe the most interesting one who displays faces of the Torah that are contrary to the law. Now, this is interesting both because it also has the word of face in it, right? So as we're starting to think about faces, there's a little bit of a parallel here, but it's interesting because it seems like the accusation there is that they teach Torah and they make it seem like this is true, even though that's contrary to our practice. So they know Torah and they teach it, and they display, like they teach it in a way that makes it seem like, it is something other than what we, I don't know, the rabbis, or we, the community, the historical community that observes, know it to be. Okay, so without getting any further lost in detail, let me just stop there and say, okay, so what do these things have in common? What does public shaming have to do with any of these other kinds of, these forms of disparaging, disgracing, disrespecting? What's going on here? What is it that Rabbi Elazar Hamadai is concerned with? So maybe we can start there. Anyone have any thoughts on that? What is this list? Okay, going once. Matt Silverstein.
Okay, since no, I almost see two doublets here. Let me bring that up in front of me a second. Because what I see is this profane sacred things relates to the festivals. Now you gave them the specific, but it seems to me that these are big things and actions, and then the whitens the face and undoes the covenant are physical. They are reactions physically to the person involved. And as seems to be happening more and more, I don't know where to go with this. I pointing this out, I'm saying it, I think it's interesting and maybe intentional, but I don't know what they're saying with that.
Okay, I hear something really valuable in what, so Matt is doing us all a favor by just out loud beginning to explore. I think just as he explores, I think right away he trips up some important point of consideration, which is that these, as Matt said, these are big things. The festival, this is a big deal, and you're treating it like nothing, right? The holy things, circumcision, the sign of the covenant, these are big. That you divided into a different category, but your language of these are big, important things, and you're just treating it like nothing. So that's one of the ways that we might think about this list. Someone who shames someone in public takes a big deal, which is a person's dignity, and just craps right all over it. Who cares? Okay, just drags them through the mud. So that's one of the things we're seeing here, is just someone who takes things that matter and treats them like they don't matter. Okay, Payam.
The list of narcissism. It's a list in which putting the individual above the group, where the person is saying, I'm better than all of you, and that's what they have in common, this list.
Great. The person doing this thinks that they are at a narcissist, says Payam, thinks they are the arbiter, and they dictate what is good and bad. They do whatever they want. They're not concerned with anything or anybody else. They are a narcissist. Okay, so that's part of what we're attacking here, is the person who just doesn't care about anything but themselves. This is what I think, this is what I want, this is how I feel, this is what I care to say at the moment. Okay, Leah Matsui.
Aren't we exhorted otherwise in other places that you shall be holy because I am holy? So sacred things, sacred festivals, the Torah, the covenant are holy things, and holy things also includes us. So we're not allowed to stomp on that, particularly publicly.
Okay, great. I like the work that it's like Leah's doing some sophisticated textual work there by picking up on that first phrasing. Someone who profanes the holy, right? Mechalel et hakedoshim, right? And remembers that, again, this last week's parsha was kadoshim, right? Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So God is holy. Now, what does that mean? We don't know, but we are trying to be godlike. And God is holy, and God imbues other things with holiness. And God's temple is holy, and God's festivals are holy, and God's people are holy. Human beings are holy. And you you're disgracing, you're profaning holy things, which means that on some level, all of these things are also an affront to God. You're just sort of you're crapping on God, right? Not just another human being or another thing. All of these things are holy things, and you're just taking it down, saying that it doesn't matter. And a person's status or dignity in the public sphere, that's a holy thing, right? A person's bearing in the eyes of others, that's a holy thing, and you're just knocking it down. Okay, all right. Let's take one more comment, and then I want to ask a little bit of a different question. So, Florine?
2 points. I see humiliating someone in public as what I've always been taught in Judaism as a murder of the soul.
Mm.
We have no right to do that.
Okay, that's right. What Florine has said, the humiliation in public is a murder of the soul. We'll be heading there, so I'm going to press pause on that thought, but we're going to come back to it. And what was the second thing, Florine?
The second part is, I think there's a difference between shaming and trying to ferret out information. When you are with a politician that you don't agree with, there's a way to ask a question to get information without shame, quote unquote, shaming. And I think people get more information if they do it that way.
Okay, good. Thanks for that important comment, because we do have to begin. I want us to think about this language. What is the thing that is being condemned here of whitening one's friend's face in public? Let's think about that precise wording, and let's do so, as Florine helps us to do, by thinking about cases of important public commentary or speech, right? Like Florine was saying, getting information. So an interview or an interrogation in the court. Certainly, judges would interrogate the witnesses, and they might say things that were shameful to them. That's certainly an example of acceptable. I mean, it's mandated by law, so it's acceptable public revealing of some of information that may be shameful to someone. So that's okay. And we've also, I think what Florine was saying is a politician, because it isn't just in a trial context, but also perhaps someone in a position of great power. Like, the only way to discourse with them will be in public, and maybe as they make public proclamations, they have to be publicly responded to. And if they have been corrupt in their dealings, that's a matter of the public. So surely there are many cases of public investigation and exploration and even verbalization of someone's behavior that are acceptable and even mandated by law. So what is this? And in asking that question, let's ask specifically what they're talking about. Whitening making someone go pale. And it's what are all the particular words here? Someone's friend, right? I saw someone say in the chat. So does that matter? That is it important that you've turned your back on your own friend? Now, friend doesn't always mean my buddy in ancient Hebrew, but there's some kind of connection. The word itself implies connection. And then also, like, the word barabim is important in the public square, amongst others. So could you, I said, you must rebuke your fellow. Well, maybe that's okay, but you have to do so in private, or you have to do so in the courtroom, or you have to do so in a particular context, but you just do it in the market, like, look at David, his hair looks stupid today, right? Or, I know something about David that's going to make him, he has, like, whatever. I'm not going to give examples, lest I publicly shame myself and then therefore lose my share in the world to come. I mean, can you do it to yourself? Is that okay? What's the action here where you shouldn't whiten the face of your friend in the public? Okay. let's think about that wording a little bit. Ariella, can I come to you? Can you respond to this?
Yes, I think it has to do with how we treat others and the respect that we have for others, and that we shouldn't say or do something that will cause the other people around to look badly upon somebody.
Okay, that's interesting. The last thing you said, especially, Ariella. Okay, so it's certainly about respecting someone and about treating them, you could fill in a bunch of well, kindly, with compassion, with dignity, with respect, etc. So that surely, but the other thing that you said is you shouldn't do something, almost the way you phrase it is with the express purpose. The purpose of it is that other people see you doing it. That's what you're doing. You're like, look, everybody, look at this shameful thing. Look at this. So that's very different than rebuke, where the purpose of it is, hey, stop doing that behavior. If the purpose of it is everybody come see, then that's part of what's problematic about this action. Kathy Kobayashi?
Yeah, I guess I have a question, really. It seems to me it's a kind of a slippery, sort of mandate, partly because it's saying, don't do something that's going to elicit a certain response from this other person. And, I imagine that there are different things. It's not just, this kind of information or this kind of accusation, but it's saying, the other person's face shouldn't whiten. But clearly there are people who are not particularly ashamed of certain things, and other people would just be, feel humiliated, and there are some people, people have very different ideas of what they're ashamed of. I guess that's what I'm. And
that's a really fascinating observation, and I've never really thought about it in this context before. That it may depend on the person that you're talking to, and friends that can take a joke and friends that can't take a joke, but more than that, friends that you could say it's part of your discourse. You just rip each other apart, and it's all okay. But then other people that are more timid or just don't like that, and what Kathy is wondering is whether you really have to think about what will embarrass this person. And it's my friend after all. So first of all, that requires a certain kind of evaluation. Can this person handle what I'm going to say? But also it implies that perhaps the crime is precisely taking that thing which that person doesn't want in the public. That's my friend, and I know that he's embarrassed about his health issues or his family issues or his job, how the thing that shames that person, I'm going to use that to take them down. All right. And another person perhaps would, so we're wondering here, but after all, it's almost a poetic phrase. So we can wonder, is there a kind of subjective standard to what it means? Because after all, what we're talking about is whether that person goes pale. Right. Okay. Who did I just saw? Was it Alexandra? Okay. No? Okay. Here's what I want to do. I want to push us forward just a little bit and look at, this is good work that we've done so far in thinking just about the phrase and the potential implications and this list that it's on, which, I think Matt was off off on the right track from the start when he suggested that this is these are really important things, big things, sacred things, as Leah said, holy things, And there's something about just like disrespecting them. And the word I would add to that is mocking them. Hamevazeh et hamoadot. Someone who disparages, makes fun of. And I do think we have to think, especially in our contemporary conversation, how part of this is, it's not just that you did it to be mean, but so much of it today, and the sharing of videos, and it's to be entertained, to make fun of, to have a good time at someone else's expense. Okay, so that's part of it as well. Okay, good. Okay, this is a good first pass. Alexandra, do you in fact want to jump in? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Having tech issues. It makes me think of that scene that you taught a couple of weeks ago in Parsha class, where Noah's son is so cursed for seeing, I forget the exact phrase, but revealing his father's nakedness, or whatever the translation is. And I think I think the class did talk about this some, but I don't know if we went all the way in this direction. So forgive me if we did. But I think that the reason he was so cursed by his father was because he took it as an opportunity to publicly shame, rather than sought this situation to like protect his reputation. And I think that is something I wish as a society we so value, like being stewards of the environment, and that's wonderful. And I just wish we also valued being stewards of each other's reputations to the same extent. And that we had that like our culture, and many of us just do that as people, like we try to do that. But I don't know that it's talked about as much as I really wish it was. And I'm so grateful for this class. And this idea of that when we don't actively look to be stewards of someone's reputation, then we can so easily turn anything into a public shame, intended or otherwise. And maybe as Jews, we should really try to look at everything as an opportunity to be stewards of each other's reputations.
Great. Thank you for that. That's important language also to enter into our conversation. The idea of reputation, because that language evokes, and again, we're in a legal realm in Jewish law and in modern society, in thinking about libel and the way the line between gossip and something criminal, which actually defames a person, actually takes a person's reputation, which is, and part of the reason this becomes a crime is because a person's reputation is their ability to move through the world, sometimes to make a living in the world, right? And so these are crimes. You know, I must say, in the Jewish context, it's very tricky, because the same place in the Torah, again, this is just last week, where it says, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha. Don't go around spreading rumors about your people. In other words, rechilas, slander, gossip, spreading falsehoods, but also just gossip, which is truths, but spread, all of this, don't do that. And then the next line, it says, rebuke your fellow when necessary. So there's this really delicate line between preserving someone's reputation, because that matters. And you have to think about someone's reputation. That's a valuable entity in their lives and in society, and you can't just tear it down. But on the other hand, that's not absolute. It's not like you always have to build up someone's reputation. What if they're a criminal? Right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to take this a step forward. So good work so far on just the phrase Hamalbin Pnei Chavero B'Rabim, someone who whitens their friend's face in public. We're really going to see like the very visual language of that imagery being played with here. In the second great utterance of that phrase, which comes in the Talmud, and here the Talmud takes things a step further. So, and this is where Florine was going earlier when she said that it's like killing someone's soul. But the Talmud is more literal than that even, right? The same spirit, but takes it quite literally. The teacher got up, the Tana, that's the teacher of the early teachers of the Mishnah, got up before Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak and taught one, here's that phrase again, one who whitens the face of their friend in public, it is as if they were spilling blood. Shofech damim. Now that's not just poetic phrasing. That is the term for murder in rabbinic law. Shfichut damim, spilling blood, murder. So one who whitens the face of their friend is killing them, is murdering them. Now that's very bold, and it can't possibly be actually true. So what does he mean? And yet Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak seems to think, no, it is true. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak said to him, Shapir Kamakta, you have spoken correctly, actually. This isn't just a flourish, a homiletical flourish. You've spoken correctly, as we see that the red leaves his face and pallor comes, right? Paleness, whiteness comes, right? So you are spilling blood. You're spilling the blood out of his face. There's almost a suggestion that you really are damaging his health. And here's one of the classic commentaries on the Talmud, the Tosafot, that just to show you just how seriously they're taking this. The red leaves and pallor comes. The face reddens at first. Now, you might have expected the phrase to be one who reddens the face of his friend in public, but Tosafot is kind of taking into account. So the face reddens at first because the blood gathers together before it rushes out. Okay, so there you have it. It's like the Talmud is saying, not only is it a terrible thing to do, not only do you lose your share in the world to come, but you're like a murderer. You're like a murderer. And the very next line in the time, it seems like, wow, that's quite a strong statement. The very next speaker in the Talmud says, no, you really are literally like a murderer, because there's something that you do to that person that hits them so hard that something physical happens to them. They lose their blood. And so you're not really killing them, but that's one step towards it, right? So let's just take that seriously for a second. I mean, what do they mean that shaming someone in public is like killing them? It's like killing them. And I remind us of what Alexandra was just asking us to consider, which is that, what does it mean to destroy someone's reputation? What does it mean to damage their image in the public? Is it like killing them? Is it like killing them? All right. Before I turn to any of the hands up, I want to see, I'd love to call on someone who hasn't spoken yet. Anyone feel compelled to jump into the mix? I see Yael got. Hi.
I'm so inspired by all of this. There's one thing that it reminds me of when someone's arrested and accused of a crime and their name is published. They haven't been tried. They haven't been convicted. And it reminds me so much of this, because when someone's humiliated in public or accused of something, their whole path is tainted. Everyone knows about it, and wherever they go, this will be a stigma on them. They can't ever undo it. And so that's why, and this lishpoch damim reminds me that the person who's doing the accusing is also having their own blood spilled. It's not just the one who's humiliated. The one participating in the act of humiliating another is also losing his or her the goodness within themselves. It's running out.
It says just that they spill blood, and Yael wants to say it's not clear whose blood they spill, right? They're spilling some of their own life force as well. I like that. But
Yes.
the other point that Yael makes is an important one. The court of public opinion, right? You know that phrase. When someone is basically convicted and tried before we actually have all of the evidence. And then, now on the one hand, and I'll repeat this again and again throughout class, on the one hand, it's clear that sometimes we need to call people out in public in order to bring their crimes to light. That's true. And on the other hand, it's also true that people are sometimes dragged through the mud in public. And then it turns out that there was something not true about all of the rumors around them. But it doesn't matter. There's a way in which they've been dragged so far down that there's kind of a cloud of toxic energy swirling around them. The public doesn't just forget, oh, now we think of you as a good person, right? And what if some stuff got revealed, but there was more, but there was more that was said, and so some of it is true, but not exactly the kinds of things you would want to have in public. I mean, what happens in these cases where we process everything in the public square, and then suddenly it's like, but we don't yet know anything, right? Okay, Susan Ledgerwood. Hi, Susan.
Hi, sorry. I was figuring out my phone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what this reminds me of is kind of to flip the script on this idea a little bit. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting over COVID. When we had the sort of summer of racial reckoning in the summer of 2020, there were a lot of people that in my spheres that did a lot of work, anti-racism work. And one of the things that came up a lot was calling out versus calling in. So when you're calling out somebody on their racist behavior, or you're calling someone in which is a kinder way to do it, because maybe they're not aware that what they've said or done is racist, or some sort of comment, look, whatever it may be. And this is kind of a reach, but if you extrapolate that out to the idea of you being akin to a murder, or when you're doing something along those lines, and also to piggyback off the idea of both people are involved or losing something in that transaction, what if you are killing off a piece of that person what if this is the ability to use this for good? What if calling someone in, which is the example that you had mentioned previously of you have to speak up if someone's not doing something right. Maybe there is a way to reconcile this within our own ethical traditions or teachings, how do I put this? So that it is used for good, so that these things are actually happening, but you're actually killing off a personal narrative that is connected to white supremacy. And you're bettering the world, not only yourself, but your person, you're kind of improving the world as it is. I don't know.
This is a really great example, and very, very, very helpful language that you're offering us, because there is a real difference, right? Should we speak out when we hear things that are terribly offensive, damaging, destructive, demoralizing? Surely that's a case that requires some form of rebuke. But the distinction that Susan is making, that Susan's community is making, is the difference between saying, "Hey, you should know that's not acceptable, and you should just know why." There's an attempt to educate, to correct, to transform, to change. I mean, a lot of this, you can call it calling out and calling in, and it seems like just a very just a change of a word, but it's a change of a whole intentionality. Right? Doing something that is an attempt to rectify the matter at hand, rather than to be offended by something and then to respond by saying, let's get this person, let's bring them down. And we can think about it in the case of racist speech or action. We can think about it in all manner of necessary corrective speech. Even then, even when it is necessary, what is the difference between trying to fix a problem or redirect, or allow for a person's humanity to be present within the crimes that they may have committed, rather than almost like as a revenge tactic, using the calling out as a way of trying to get that person back to destroy them, right? So that's very, very, very helpful language. Okay, with that said, I want now, because we're starting to think about a person's humanity, and what we're doing to a person's humanity, and whether we can critique people and still honor their humanity. I want to bring us to the commentator that we have started following, one of the great commentaries on Pirkei Avot, the Maharal of Prague. Maharal of Prague. We introduced ourselves to the Maharal last week, 16th and early 17th century, great Jewish thinker, one of the great Jewish thinkers, theologian and philosopher, and just has this ability to take things and broaden them, to make things very, very, very big, very vast, to look for what is the big picture, the big message, to abstract a little bit, but to a point where we're considering the fullness of the matter. And so he does here. I want to take a look at the Maharal's language here, as he comments on the whitening of the face of their friend in public. He says, right, we just said it's like killing them. He says something else. One who whitens the face of their friend in public is causing their divine image to be lost. Abed Selam Elohim, causing their divine image to be lost. For a person is created with a divine image, but Selam Elohim, and there's nothing greater or holier among all the creatures. Even the angels on high don't have a Selam Elohim. That's what we have. That's what's uniquely divine and special about us, godly about us. And so one who whitens the face of their friend takes away this elevated part of their humanity, the divine image. And that's why it says one who whitens the face of their friend, because that image, that divinity that we see in others is in the face. I don't know, he means this both kind of loosely, like a face is like an image, and so it's sort of that, but he means it also, I think, literally. Like, when do you really see the God in somebody? When you look in their eyes, when you look in their face, right? It's not their clothes, it's not their body, but there's something about seeing a human face. That's where we see the divinity within a human being. Okay, so that's very big. That's very big. But what do you think he means, right? I've been asking, what does the Talmud mean by saying it's like killing someone? What does the Maharal mean when he chooses very different language and says, when you shame someone in public, you strip them of their divinity. You take away that godly thing in them. And again, here we are considering ways in which we sometimes do need to call people out in public. So what does it mean to say sometimes you do this and it's like you took away everything that was divine about them? Bobby, what do you think of that? Can you unmute for us? Unmute for us. Perfect. Oh, no, still not. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Oh, okay.
There you go. We hear you.
Sorry. I'm going to change the subject just very, very slightly. I know someone who was publicly humiliated on one of these websites where you post about somebody and it wasn't really true. And they had this experience of their life force draining from them. What do you tell them, Jewishly, godly, to save not to save their soul soul is saved, but so that they'll feel better about it? I know this is changing the subject, and I'm sorry.
No, it's very much on our subject, right? Like, what happens to that person who is called? They felt
just like you described, the face whitening for a few years, because it stays on the internet and you can't get it off, and the internet laws allow them to keep it there, and etc.
Right. This new public square, the internet, right, is like it forces us to always consider how permanent everything is. So that like it's always on. We have this concept of, what do we say to them Jewishly? There's a tshuva process, and but like, not if it's just out there it never goes away, right? Okay, so again, just as we come to a close here, any thoughts on what it means to say that publicly shaming someone is stripping them of their divinity, of their godliness? You know, why do you think that is? What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, I'm
It's
gonna turn
stripping them of their,
You want to finish that thought, Bobby?
it's stripping them of their confidence with their community.
Mm.
They feel like people, they're publicly shamed.
Mm.
That
Okay.
it's-
All right, Regina, what do you think?
Well, one thing that came to mind, it's stripping them of their potential to be good. That's what I'm thinking. It's the potential, because maybe they're not there now. So yeah.
I love that. I love that, because I just brought up this idea of tshuva, right? Of like return. What is the return towards? The return is towards hopefully some greater self. That part of us that can aspire to be better. That's also part of the distinctly human feature that we think of as divine. And what it means to publicly shame someone is in this case is to take them down. The Maharal says this is the side of us that's divine. The other side of us is just beastly. It's just to say you're just a beast. You're nothing. You're a monster. You're irredeemable. You're irredeemable. You have no divine potential. You cannot grow back. Right? Did I see Ben Poor just out there?
You did. Just clearly, I was thinking along the lines of what some other people have said. This feels like maybe a guide to when we do have to do this sort of rebuke for a real person who has done harm or something, or has hurt us, like to hold on to that image of the divine, or really be able to find something about them that feels redeemable, or at least potential for redeemable, as we're calling someone in or out in those ways.
I love that brilliant final comment there, because that's so important. Obviously, we can't wrap everything up, but we've been conscious this whole time of a certain tension where we're going to need to. The Torah even mandates that sometimes we take people to task. We're not silencing all public commentary or discourse, but we certainly are being encouraged to keep things in the private sphere as much as possible. But even in those cases where a certain kind of exchange has to be public, can we enter into it with that kind of intentionality that I don't want to kill this person with my words. I don't want to. This person is a creature of God, is imprinted with divinity. I don't want to take that away from them. Can I do this in a way that doesn't strip them of everything that is noble about them, and nevertheless say the words that I need to say? That's a good. It isn't. This is a mandate to be careful and to be constrained in our tendency to relish in public shaming. But it is also a way of thinking about those moments where we do need to call people in, as Susan said, and to think about what it means to speak to someone when they need to be spoken to, but not in a way that celebrates their downfall, celebrates their disgrace. Right? I have one more minute, and I'm going to take one last thought from Lori Hall.
Well, public shaming doesn't really work in order to curtail people's actions. All it does is really turn people inwards and shut them down, and makes them hide. So the idea that you're going to get people to change their actions by shaming them, it really backfires, and it just means that people, just their self-esteem suffers, and they go underground. They keep everything a secret instead.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Lori. That's also a very important, on this same theme of how do we engage in ethical discourse. There's a practical matter here too, which is, Lori says, it also doesn't work when you do this kind of public shaming. Nobody says, "Oh wow, thanks for pointing that out. I'm going to change my behavior." They're wounded. They're humiliated, and they either go hiding or they respond with anger, and they entrench in their positions. And entrenching in their positions, I mean, isn't that the state of affairs that we find ourselves in in this cultural moment. Speaking of putting a person, putting them out, I want to give you one last image here. The Maharal is great with images, and also the great thing about the Maharal is he's written on almost everything. So not only did the Maharal comment on the teaching that we've been studying tonight from Pirkei Avot, but he also has a commentary on the Talmud, on the narrative sections of the Talmud, and he just uses different language here. And I wanted to leave you with this language because it's also an image to take with us, as Ben is encouraging us to do. Take some of this thinking with us. What does it mean that I might kill someone with my speech? What does it mean that I might rob them of their divinity with my speech? And one final image for you, the Maharal says, but when it says that one who whitens the face of their friend is as if they have spilled blood, that is because one who whitens the face of their friend is putting out the light in the face, which is the essence of the person, like blowing out a candle, right? Just extinguishing a person, just putting them out, right? So let's be careful. Let's just be careful with our speech. Our tradition warns us again and again to be so careful with our speech. And it doesn't mean not speaking. We are a tradition of words, right? And there is mandated speech, but let's be careful, even when we need to speak, to safeguard that divine image, that divine light. That is what is beautiful about every single person who was created in the image of God. Okay, thanks everybody. Great discussion. I'll see you next week.